how do you reach past where you already are as an artist? So you've been taking this creature design class, and you've got all these awesome creatures. How do you move not just at the level of what you can do, but how do you put yourself in a position where you are doing better designs than ever before? Because that's what's going to get you a job. Better designs, better sculpts, all of it put into some kind of production environment. And so Kristen's asking, how do you reconcile this for a production pipeline? Because I know you got to find a production pipeline. So we'll get there, but how do we do that? Before we reconcile this with a production pipeline, how do we make sure that what we are putting into a production pipeline is as awesome as it can be, better than anything we've ever done before? And this is a really important point for me because I've been growing as an artist myself lately, and I don't have a lot of time because I got kids, I got a business, and I have to be very involved in all of it. And I would personally rather be a better father than a better artist, which is a difficult conundrum. I don't have a ton of time. How do I get better than ever with less time than I've probably ever had? I've wasted a lot of time in my 20s and 30s trying to figure this out and that out. Now I got to get running. There's a really important thing that this does. This provides me with problems. What's happening here, 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 and in here. I have very specific creature-related problems, and I have to solve these problems. So in my design and in my character, I can't just get away with, say, pulling something from this guy or that guy. I now am out in the wilderness all by myself, having to kind of figure this out and pull this kind of stuff together. So this is where we get into this idea, this production question, because do I take this character and completely define him? Do I finish him, or do I start moving him into a production pipeline? And so this is where I want to make sure that you guys are aware of. Make sure you're like really clear on what a production pipeline is. Is a production pipeline design? Is a production pipeline design? What do you think? It's a really important question for you to define this. Now, in some cases, as Christian is saying, the design happens in a production pipeline. But still, you can separate these out. Design is one thing, production is another thing. You have to design it first, and then you have to manufacture it. Right? But these are very different worlds. Design is in 2D, and then production is in 3D. So why don't we hire this draftsman, this concept artist, to draw us a creature, and then we go in and we sculpt that creature from that design, right? That's a skill you have to have because that's a workflow you have to have. At the highest levels, this is not how it happens, though. At the highest levels, they draw, they sculpt, they paint, they do it all. At the highest levels, you need somebody who can kind of manage the whole thing and do it in 3D. And so there is a demand for people who can do this stuff, like Simon Lee, in 3D and render it out for, say, book covers, to show a director, and to be able to do it very, very, very fast. Simon Lee does these in hours, not days, hours. He does lots of these every single day. Lots of them. And that's what I'm really trying to emphasize here is Simon Lee is a traditional guy. He kind of pulls these together really, really fast. He came out of nowhere, and next thing you know, he's working on all the top films because he can do this stuff really, really, really fast and fluidly, and they just look beautiful with great gesture and great form. Your task is to be able to kind of merge these worlds, but most of the knowledge you're going to get from training and teachers and things like that is in the production pipeline side of things. And so what my challenge to you is shake this up, take a character like this, something that you just kind of riff on, and start to see if you can pull these things into production, or start to play with and kind of find these different designs. And in fact, you should do this separately from production. But I'm going to show you taking this guy into production a little bit. Not the whole thing. But really, a significant skill is to get this figured out. Try to put yourself into these kinds of positions. Let's make this guy with a little bit of a bare behind. So I'm going to get in now and start to kind of find some things, and then I'm going to totally change tacks on this. So I'm going to divide him, and using clay buildup, and actually first I'm going to use S3. I'm going to try to find some bony landmarks. So I would try to find, say, the acromion process, but it's actually a scapula that I'm looking for here. Little bone, elbow. And I just draw on it like this. Okay, rib cage, sacrum, a little bit of a tail probably right in there. Try to find a little eye. Try to find the mouth. Ears, any kind of defining things, you know, anything that'll help me out here. And then I might go in with clay buildup after I found these very simple points and start to define things a little better, like let's pull the deltoid from the front. And I go into this mode where I'm just going to start to kind of 0.05, that number lock is off, 0.0. And I'm going to lower my embed, depth embed to like 5. Because I'm really in this kind of like flaying stage. I'm adding muscles and textures. So I'm going to just flow some muscles here. Try to establish some flat spots that'll help. Bicep, tricep kind of stuff. This is all exploratory anatomy at this point. I only need to do really one side, but I can do multiple sides if I want. Get that. Brachioradialis. Very human at this point. Epicondyles. Expansive. Really separate the arm from the rib cage. It's good sometimes to really create these strong separations. Maybe we can look at some ungulate hoofs, understand a little bit more of what's happening there. But this is the muscling phase. Let's get the abdominals, the package, the knee, and then now the muscling phase for me is also kind of a structural phase. So I'll go in and start to flatten things, learning my animal anatomy and whatnot. A little bit of this like third toe that comes out. This is something I learned from anatomy. And I use it to help me structure this. Okay. Little bit of structural understanding. Let's get the muscle, and then we've got the jaw. Give a little bit of an extra shape in there. Carve in the orbit of the eye a bit. I find it useful to always carve the orbit of the eye in and then pull something back out. So clay buildup is my tool at this point. And I'm trying to create just structures. Have this disappear behind the head. Magnificent jaw in there. And like I said, it's a muscling, it's a structural, and a large part of that is this planar capacity. So chunk, 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 right? Tuk, tuk. Start to separate the arm from the rest of the body. Separate these as pieces and see if I can kind of make these flow. Now, once I've got kind of like a little bit of a sense of this, and I'm working high level here, guys, so if this is a little bit tough, don't sweat it. This is high level. Maybe come in a little bit more. Oops. Also trying to get away from just clean lines. I'm trying to interrupt lines. There you go. I'm cool with this as that kind of beginning gambit. And you can see muscling and structural stuff is kind of intact. Only one side of it. So how do we kind of move this forward? This is me on my own kind of working with some inspiration and trying to kind of get some cool design that I can then kind of push and pull around. So I'm going to duplicate this guy. And so we're going to name this one just design. Then I'm going to name this one T-pose. Okay. And remember, we have all the tools in ZBrush at our disposal. So don't forget that. There's a lot of things that we could do right now with this model. We could even just say go into ZModeler and break something out. But before I move on, let me check in with you guys. Simon, when doing these muscle phases, would you say it's best to use a fairly small brush? I think sometimes I use too big a brush. Simon, it's a really good point. And what I would do is to say, instead of developing a rule, I would start to develop a strategy towards brush size. Do it small, do it large, start to figure out when it works. Because I noticed this thing when I was oil painting. There's always this rule, use the biggest brush possible. But that will give you a specific type of painting, and after a while it's kind of a boring painting. Then I tried something else. I used the smallest brush I could find. And then I was like, wow, this can give me a whole new level of form, but it would literally take me forever and I would lose big planes. And so what I realized is there's really no rule. The rule is nonsense. The rule is developed by some teacher that needed to communicate something to a very specific student, and that student needed to hear, use the biggest brush possible. But the world doesn't need that. Just that student needed that. And you need that every now and then. But that's not the rule. There is no rule. So use the big brush, use the small brush, but you need to do it so that you understand what the benefits of each one are. Does that make sense? Now let's get this guy into production. I've kind of sculpted him already. So what I'm going to do, go along his spine. See how it's right there in the spine? And I'm going to rotate him. So he's mostly straight up and down. You can also throw in a floor and put him in transparency. What? Let's say, get that lined up. Draw, I'm going to increase the size. There we go. And I'm going to try to line up boom and boom. Okay. Now I'm also going to attempt to squash this stuff, but it may or may not work. Doesn't matter though, because we have already our energy. And all I'm trying to do right now is just get this kind of in play. And I'm going to have to pick like one side that's going to be representative, and also the general angle for it. I'd say that's going to be his general angle. The angle he lives in is going to be like that.